Sure, here you go. Hey, good day. My name is Phil the Cruz. Welcome to a new episode of Cruising with Phil. My new guest, first time meeting in person, talking quite a bit of tweet, is Albert Koehl from Bikeways Coalition.
Uh, Community Bikeways, but that's pretty close.
Okay, excuse me. I've been St. Patrick's Day. I've had a little this morning. So how you doing, Albert?
I'm doing great, thank you.
Great, thanks for coming on the show. I know you're busy, so I just want to tell the people who you are and what you're all about.
Okay, well, I mostly work on road safety advocacy. I'm an environmental lawyer. I founded a group recently, well, 3 years ago now, called Bikeways Coalition, but certainly road safety issues are always top of mind and top of priority for me.
Oh wow. How long is the what year did you start the coalition? Back
Well, we started that just at the outset of the pandemic, and our thinking, what happened was, and we're like a lot of people, new circumstances, new challenges. We thought to ourselves, how can we help? So a bunch of us got together, cycling and walking advocates, and decided what we should be doing is finding more space for people to ride their bikes. That, of course, was the key issue at the beginning of the pandemic. Where are we going to find this space to do the things we should be doing, which mainly at that time was social distancing, as well as doing the things that we always have wanted to do, which is getting exercise, getting outside, getting a breath of fresh air. And so we set up it was called Toronto Community Bikeways Coalition. We go by Community Bikeways. And the idea was we asked for our demand, and that was a letter signed by 120 community groups, a demand for 100 kilometers of new temporary bikeways to mirror bus routes and subway routes. So the idea being that a lot of essential workers and people reliant on transit were very reluctant to take transit initially. And so we thought, well, the best way to accommodate them would be to have temporary bike lanes 100 kilometers across the city, as I say, mirroring the busiest transit routes.
Sorry about that. Try to take the phone off the hook. All right, that'll go anyways. So I gotta ask you, what's the most challenging thing you found first when you started off with all these, what you wanted to start with the bike paths and all, which is a
Yeah, well, initially, I helped start a group called Bells on Bloor, and that was in 2007. And I'd been inspired by other activists who had been calling for a Bloor-Danforth bike lane. And I'd been participated with people like Hamish Wilson, Angela Bischoff on rides that, had to 20, 25 people from Jane to downtown along Bloor Street. And I thought, wouldn't it be wonderful if we got 1,000 people to do that? And so we brought together a number of activists, as I mentioned, Hamish and Angela, also Kristen Courtney, Elizabeth Marchand, Doug Watterson, who was the owner of Curbside Bikes. And we decided it'd be fabulous to have a big parade from High Park to Queen's Park to give people an idea of what the city might look like if it had a lot more people on bikes on our roads. So the first year, that was in 2007, we got 500 people together to do that on a ride. It was a family-oriented ride, kids, the elderly, every age group, and it was a fun ride. The second year we had 1,000 people, and the third year we had 2,000 people.
nice.
So it really grew, but it simply reaffirmed our view that people wanted to be on bikes and they wanted to be on roads, but it wasn't safe to do that. So that amount of interest really got us to doing a lot more things. Initially, we thought, well, if we just show City Hall how much people want to cycle, they will say, wow, this is a great idea. Let's put in bike lanes.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it's not that easy in
No,
Toronto.
no. I see.
So we transitioned from that to continuing the rides, but doing videos, doing deputations, doing lobbying at City Hall, doing bike counts, all kinds of things. And finally, we got that bike lane in place in 2016. So it took, 9 years for the pilot to be put in place and 10 years for it to be made permanent. So but our thinking was, if we can get it in, even a small portion into this very popular cycling area, then that's our foot in the door. And I would say, looking back over that, we were right in that, because that foot in the door got us Avenue Road to Shaw, then we got Shaw to Runnymede. Now we're working on the extension. We got Danforth during the pandemic, and then we got Yonge Street. So we're starting to build that network. It's starting to fit together. Still some work to do, but it's
But
starting to fit.
Young for All finally passed. That's nice, you know.
Yeah, Robin Richardson and Young for All did a fabulous job. It showed again how much work is involved. It shouldn't, as we put it, shouldn't be a popularity contest to get a safe road. But sadly, that's what the fight over Yonge Street showed yet again, that you needed to show you had a majority support simply to get your basic right of safe passage on our roads.
Yeah, I find it so frustrating. For me, I find it frustrating. Like, see you guys, you're all volunteer. You're a lawyer, right? You're volunteer.
Yeah.
This is on your own time. This is you're not paying for this, but you guys are. And this pisses me off as running for mayor. Just pissing me off seeing like this. Kudos for all your struggles, and I interviewed Robert and Richard, Robert and Robin, and just hearing their stories. And it's so frustrating. It's like, why does it have to be a fight? It should be just so standard. I mean, in the military, I lived all over the world. I biked everywhere. I lived in Milan. Like, it's a norm today. It's a norm there. Montreal 20 years ago was like what we're going through right now. 20 years ago, Montreal they went through, but it shouldn't be such a struggle. And it just pains me to see. I mean, I love you guys and your passion, but I shouldn't have to be like that. You should have to fight and struggle. And it's like, it took you 9 years to get your foot in the door. Like, it's just, it's reluctant, the gas and all that stuff, trying to convert. It's getting there. I think it's great. Young for All, hopefully get to Eglinton Station and the Danforth going all the way down to the end. But if I get elected, I said, let's complete it, And,
Absolutely. Crosstown, Bloor Danforth, and Crosstown Yonge Street are really central elements to a network that we're still fighting to get. But you hit the nail on the head when you said, they're all volunteers. I mean, if we were, in the auto lobby, we'd probably be living in big mansions in Rosedale. But
if you charge by the hour now, you'd be rich.
That's right. But most cycling advocacy, as most road safety advocacy, is really done by volunteers. So, there are some paid jobs, but it simply shows kind of the passion that people have for cycling, that they're willing to do it over many years on their own time. And that's really pretty well across the board in terms of cycling advocacy. It's really impressive, the passion that you see the people exhibit, and but it also shows the injustice of the system. The fact that here you are riding a bicycle, no pollution, it's quiet, it's healthy, and yet you've got to fight for every inch or centimeter of space.
You're fighting for good health.
That's right.
So, yeah. But when they passed the Young for All, when they got it passed through the motion there not too long ago, I was actually in tears. Like, so I was like, because I met two of you guys. I met Robert and Robert, right? Interviews, and just hearing their stories and their passion. I didn't meet anybody else. Now you're the first person I met for biking. But I said, I seen all the list, the names you mentioned. I've seen their faces. And Stuart is another one. I just like, oh my gosh. I said, I was like, you got to sit back and go like, 30 years from now, people are gonna look back, and I'm gonna make sure I'm gonna get on I'm working on a bike called PedOTO, a bike pod, video pod. And I'm working on a website, and I'm gonna get all your names on there. I know volunteer is like an honorary position. Some people don't like to be recognized; they just like doing it. I'm like that too. But you know what? I think it should be done. Like, your name should be on there, so people look back and say, "Hey, you started this. Albert Koehl, who's this guy? He started this 20 years ago. Thank you so much." There has to be a beginning and there has to be an end, right? So when people look, how does this come about? Kind of like you're all like city landmarks, basically, right? You're like, where'd they come from? How they get established? 20 years from now, when they'll see a little sign.
It's really true that there's so many people, even on the young, in the young fight. There's so many people that were involved in that over many years, and it's never a case where there's sort of a tipping point. The truth is that everything builds up to a point until you finally get success. But all of those people, often over many years, are forgotten, or they're not recognized.
Yeah.
But that's generally how advocacy works. Like this idea that all of a sudden it was, one person or one event that tipped the scales. The truth is, it's a cumulative process. All of that work over many years feeds into the ultimate success.
Yeah, just like, again, you're right. you're very humble. Just being modest about it. But I do volunteer work for like I did my campaign last year. I did volunteer people. I take no pictures. I'm not a picture guy, just for the election. But now I got to take pictures and all be photo ops and all that. I don't really believe in it, but like I said, I've done a lot of volunteer work all around the world, and I just do it and get it done. But to get to the point, you say like these guys have done this so much volunteer. They've done their work and they just put it out there. And I was talking to Robert about that. I said, is there actually a history book or anything in a webpage that we have the history of biking, the growth that you're part of, like your name's on there, part of this Danforth was started by Albert Koehl and all these names that they started back in 19 like you said, okay, like 9 years ago. I didn't know that existed. You told me that right now. Did you find that anywhere on a website? What you just told me, like 9 years ago?
Well, it's a good question. In fact, over the last number of years, I've been working on a cycling history book about Toronto,
Nice.
and the plan is to have that published before the end of the year.
That's
I do have
great.
a publisher, but that was precisely the idea of what you were saying. Like it seemed to me every time I did a bit of research, I found, wow, there are other groups that have done exactly this already. And then it was sort of like, I mean, the expression is peeling the onion. Every time you looked a bit further, there was so much more to be seen. And it went all the way back to the 1890s. I mean, it was a different dynamic then.
Yeah.
It was really the wealthy classes that cycled. There was a novelty. And then it changed, with into the 20th century and into the 1950s, 60s, the bicycle really reached its low point. And then we saw sort of a little bit of revival into the 70s and then again in the 90s. And that's sort of a trajectory that we're on now. But it's been a slow process that started about half a century ago. And we often say, well, look at the Dutch. And then you say, well, they were different. Well, the truth is, in the 1970s, all the things that we talk about today, air pollution, physical fitness, trying to have car-free cities, all of those things we talked about in the 70s, and there was a movement, but it simply didn't succeed. The only thing that's new today in terms of that conversation is climate change. So that's something we've added to the equation. But all of these things that we're doing today were started by advocates in the 70s, with the whole kind of environmental consciousness, Pierre Trudeau and participation, all of those things started in the 70s.
Those days, participation. I remember those days. Yeah, yeah.
Participation.
Yeah.
Trudeau was a great fitness buff, and
Yeah.
there was a fitness revolution. People really excited about fitness and riding bikes, and that all fit together. But unfortunately, we didn't get over the hump at that time. Other countries did, the Netherlands and Denmark and so on. But we didn't make it over that hump, and it's partly because our car culture is so strong and is such a formidable foe.
I interviewed a couple from Lisbon. It's in my video pod there. Lisbon, Portugal, young couple, and they're advocates for they're great advocates for climate, fuel, hot biking, no zones. And they said to me in the interview, goes, "You guys drive a lot of big cars in Canada." It was hilarious to hear their talk, the big SUVs and all that. That how do you drive around that so much? Like, did you have a lot of gas up there or what? It was hilarious to hear their view of how we live, right? I was gonna ask you a personal question if you can answer if you want. What drives you to do this? What drives you at the beginning to start? What drives you each day to do this personally yourself? What makes the people like? What makes you do this, Robert? What's in it for you? Why do you do it anyway? Why do you waste your time volunteering all these hours, getting things done? You're a lawyer. You make good money. You don't have to do anything. You can just sit back and enjoy your luxury, but you're out there doing things, right? So what drives you?
What got me involved was I recall a specific moment, and we're sitting around with a group of neighbors, and I remember someone saying, bike lanes would be nice on Bloor Street, but it's not realistic. And I thought, well, what is the reality that you accept? I mean, is the reality that we have climate change of air pollution, all that noise, and road danger? Is that the reality that we're supposed to accept? So that to me was really a pivotal moment where I said, that's not the reality that I want for my city or my country, and it's really my job to get involved. I mean, you know that a lot of people have great ideas, and they say, and we often hear, wouldn't it be great if someone did this, or did that? Well, I mean, there is that someone doesn't exist. It's either you or me or someone that we're sitting beside. So for me, that was a pivotal moment. And I would say for me, it was simply a question of just simply seemed the right thing to do. I mean, to be honest, I don't spend a lot of time thinking about, why I do it. It just seems like the right thing to do. And probably a lot of advocates are in exactly that same position, right? I mean, if you're making a lot of money at it, you can say, well, this is, it's a lucrative business. That's why I do it. But I think for many of us, it's just a question of justice, right? Because many of us, when we ride on the roads, we do have that sense of just seems unfair. We're doing the right thing. We're doing what sort of the state tells us to do is a good thing, and yet it's dangerous. And when you are passed by a car or truck, you have that sense of the injustice of it, that you're doing the right thing, and yet you're certainly not treated as if you matter.
Yeah.
And I think that sense of injustice, as others have said, it forms your political consciousness. And I think that was the case for me. I think you have a strong sense of this doesn't seem quite right. And for many people get involved in advocacy, and I'm one of the fortunate ones that this isn't my case, but for many people it's because they've been hit by a car, or they have a family member that's died, or they know someone else, a loved one that's died or been seriously injured. I mean, that motivates their advocacy. I'm at least fortunate to say that's not my case, but for many that is the case, sadly.
Yeah, it's sad when you say like tragedy drives you to do a good thing. Unfortunately, right?
Yeah,
people
I would call them
sorry. Ed.
I would say, many of them are accidental advocates in the sense that it is what we call accidents, what today we call crashes or collisions, that motivates them to try to right these injustices.
Like traffic lights, like down here on the road, they had to put a light there at a church after struggling for 4 years. 4 people died crossing the street because the old zoning laws. There's Victoria Park and Pharmacy, and there's no light in between, right? For the old zoning laws. So they fought that, and they got it. But 4 people had to die. My point is, you have to die to get something done around here, or what? It's just sad to say that, right? Set a precedent, basically.
Yeah, in fact, I remember speaking to Martin Rees at Advocacy for Respect for Cyclists, and I made the comment that you have to die to get things done, and he said that's not actually enough. No. And the truth is, sadly, we've seen cases where people have died, and yet it hasn't motivated change, and that's perhaps the saddest part.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. People ask you, like, they go, "So what do you volunteer?" So I always say, "Why not?" It's the right thing to do inside. How do you explain it? It just feels good inside, and you're doing it for everybody else. And why should I benefit by myself? Just being selfish, doing it for myself. For the bike paths and not. Like I said, these bike paths should have been completed years ago, like back then when you started, like 9 years back in. Maybe after that, get it all complete. Now you're fighting for the extension of the Danforth, and the future is young going to Eglinton. I biked there not too long ago in the ice there. And that's another thing with the. What do you think of the whole snow plowing? I see all the pictures. I think I've seen some of your pictures as well. The whole one side they'll shovel the sidewalk but not the bike path, and they'll do the bike path but not the sidewalk. So they give you a choice.
Yeah, well, in terms of my advocacy, I've been focusing on Bloor West. In other words, the extension from Runnymede to the city border with Mississauga. But in terms of progress is slow, right? So the fact that we this year, for the first time in the downtown area, have our sidewalks cleared, that's actually something to be pretty excited about. That after all those years of not getting that done, we're finally getting our sidewalks plowed, and that's a step forward. There's some growing pains there for sure. I know on our street, we'll have the sidewalk plow go through, and then the street plow will come by and push all the snow back onto the sidewalk. And it's actually sometimes a bit worse because now you've got all the ice and the chunks that have been pushed onto the sidewalk. So it's so I'd say it's probably something we should be celebrating that we finally got that. There's obviously some growing pains, and even with bike lanes, like I get excited when I see a snow plow on the bike lanes and they're putting down a little bit of salt, and that's that's progress as well. Is it perfect? No, it's not perfect yet, but we're moving in the right direction. The idea 10 years ago that we get bike lanes plowed, nobody would have believed that. So
they were laughing about who bikes? They say who bikes the winter time, right?
Precisely.
They make an excuse not to get the job done, right?
I get a lot of
I get from people around the world. I get emails a lot. A lot of people watch the Young for All debate on YouTube. So people from different parts of the world that don't have bikes at all or lanes. So they email me and said, how do we get started? How do we get in contact with these people? We want to do the same thing. So basically, believe it or not, what you guys are doing are actually inspiring other people around the world, other countries around the world. They don't even have bike lanes. Like,
I think that's really true. Like, I mean, certainly we want to measure ourselves against, what we need as opposed to what others have. But right now, we often look to Montreal, and Montreal is doing a lot better than we are. And we often forget that when we go to other cities around the province, we're quite a ways ahead of them. But we're really, I mean, the true measure is where we need to be. And that's where we need to be in terms of climate change, where we need to be in terms of road safety and public health, affordability, all of those things. So that's the real measure. Where do we need to be to satisfy those demands?
and right now they're talking about the Gardner as the issue for election, right? Like, I want to get the Gardner tear down, and I've seen pictures of it. I've been around the world. I think we're one of the last few cities that have a elevated expressway. I saw the documentary in Chicago. They tore it down after they did the underground highway, but they still have traffic problems after that, you know. But I'm just saying that I think you tear it down, you get rid of it. You know, people are worried about where's the traffic going to go. But I think you got to do like you said around the world, like in Milan or where was it? Milan and also parts of Holland, they've got rid of the traffic. Like it's now a no traffic, no parking zone, right? So the cars are on the outside, and they either bus it in or bike it or taxi. Like bike taxis are big in parts of Europe. I don't know if you've been or what parts of Europe you've been. You've probably seen it. Like in England, I was in England. In Milan, I used to take a taxi to the base every day for 2 years. I took my car to the airport. That was it. It was great. So I come over here. I say, hey, I took a bike taxi. But and then it's funny because we have for safety conscious. We were over there. I just get on the back seat of the moped, no helmet or nothing, just sideways and wrap my arm around the guy and take me over so and so. Right? It was no big deal, right? You know, it's so funny.
But we have learned, we've got long experience knowing that building more roads is not going to solve the motor traffic problem. I mean, all it does is that creates more motor traffic. And I would think, even one success that I feel proud of is I know once they installed the Bloor bike lane, they did counts of cars before and after. And afterwards, 4,000 cars had simply disappeared. Like we don't know where they went, but they were gone.
So
and I thought,
so it happened. So it can be done, right? I think I'm more.
Well,
do you think sorry, go ahead.
Well, and the one thing we hear now is, well, if you have if you put in bike lanes, then the road will be constricted, more people idling, more climate change. And it's actually quite the opposite, because of what I always say is if building more roads was the solution to climate change, we'd have solved it a long time ago. Yeah. But what we do know is that when we narrow roads, I mean, that's the only way to do it. It's all about allocation of space. If you make roads very wide and make it very easy to drive, people will do that, because that's not only are you making it convenient, but you're also sending the signal that that's how we get around. And it's the same thing with the Gardner debate. Now, people are saying, well, what about the traffic? Well, the truth is, I mean, those roads induce traffic. We know that. And but we also know the solutions. I mean, if you look at Toronto right now, and it's, we're in this fight for so long that we often fail to notice that we're actually making progress. So look at Toronto right now. They've got the Ontario line going in. We've got the Finch LRT. We've got the Eglinton Crosstown, the Eglinton West, the Scarborough. Now, so some of those individual decisions are a bit questionable, but there is a lot of transit going in. So the bizarre thing about the Gardner Expressway, especially the Gardner East, is that we're taking a bit of this, a portion of this expressway, and we're going to move it to a new location and rebuild it. I mean, that is a colossal project. And if you look at it on paper, you'd say, well, we're just moving this thing over a little bit. But then when you really have to walk or cycle along it to see what a colossal project this is. And when you see these cars, if you're on the highway and you're driving along, what you look beside, you see the guardrail, and that's all you see, right? But when you're under it or beside it, you see how massive this infrastructure is. And the whole idea that we, in 2023, in the midst of a climate crisis, are going to build an elevated expressway. I mean, that's going to be an embarrassment for the city, but it's also going to be an embarrassment for those councillors who could intervene now and say, that project might have made sense when Jim Karagianis and Rob Ford and, Giorgio Mammoliti were there, but it doesn't make any sense for today's realities. And they're going to be, they're going to own that decision not to intervene, especially on the Gardner West, where you still have an opportunity now to intervene and to change course, to save a lot of money, and also to save us the embarrassment of building. And this project, the actual construction will start in 2026. That's going to be an election year. Save us the embarrassment of during an election year starting to rebuild an elevated expressway.
You said about they don't appreciate how big the thing is. They'll let you walk around or bike around. It's like when you drive. When I bike to Montreal, so I say there's a lot of hills there, going up and down. But in the car, you don't realize it. But when you're on a bike, you go, oh my gosh, I appreciate it now. So that's what they need to go out there and take a walk, bike around, see how big this thing's gonna be. I saw it. A bike like you biking around, going, holy smokes, this is gonna be nuts. Let alone the traffic.
And that's precisely what we're saying to council right now. Give us an updated report. What could possibly be your reason for not wanting to update the public 8 years after this project was started on where we're at with it? Look at what are the updated costs, because the lion's share of the work is yet to be done. So this is a good time. Give us the updated construction costs. They were estimated at 718 million 8 years ago. What are they now?
Yeah.
But there's also land that could be freed up. That land was valued at something like $10 million an acre 8 years ago. What is it worth today? And also look at what the feasible options are, because you're going to own that decision, because you've got an opportunity at this point to at least find out all those facts and then decide, well, maybe you're not swayed. Maybe you say it's still a really good decision. Well, that's fine, but it's your decision. So we know in history, I loved a book called The March of Folly, and they look at various events through history where you thought, why did people pursue this particular path? And one of them was the Vietnam War, where, successive presidents had an opportunity to intervene, but they all had reasons for not doing it. But this is the same folly that we're pursuing today. If you have an opportunity to intervene and you don't, well, you're going to be remembered for that failure. But when you're in it, seems to make perfect sense. But that's all we're saying now. Give us a report on the updated costs, the foregone revenues, and the feasible options. That's a simple question of transparency. It's a simple question of prudent financial management, and it's simply due diligence, especially when you're talking about $1 billion, which is a figure so large that I think most of us can't comprehend. So this council, over the next number of years, will probably spend lots of time arguing about $10,000 decisions and $50,000 decisions. But for a $1 billion decision, their attitude is, well, we decided that 8 years ago. We're not touching that one.
I saw pictures of the cheating channel there, like the one I made, like that whole area built up with ravines and canoes. So I'm thinking like they're gonna build this thing, right? This contraption. So how are you gonna advocate for climate change and all? We got this highway going this way. You got canoes under the water, because with anything with that comes with pollution, right? With gas and all that, and it defeats the purpose of making this whole greenery area. Like I saw the pictures there, and I said, okay, you want to do that? Why are you gonna put this thing there? It doesn't make any sense.
Well, that's exactly the point. Is so you're spending all this money developing that area, which is a pretty exciting area for the city. You've got beautiful new bridges. You're gonna have beautiful new parks, a new waterway, sort of a revitalized Don River, and then you're gonna, at the edge of it, you're gonna put a 1950s era expressway. It's totally incongruous, and that's the question they need to be asking.
Because people are gonna like my friends in Europe, they're gonna come over and gonna say, "Why did you build this thing? You got this beautiful park and greenery, like you said." It is embarrassing. I mean, I know. I just heard the other day that who was it, Bradford? They don't want to meet the 40 groups, the advocates for they want an update. They want to present, so they don't want to go through the whole round of arguments and debates and all that. But that's what it's all about. Why you want to? If you decided what you're going to do now, why you're not going to take the public interview? Like you said,
that's been. I was a bit disappointed in Bradford saying that we have to deal with this traffic congestion. I mean, that's no longer in 2020s. We don't deal with traffic congestion by building more roads. No. We deal with it by building transit, by getting people out of onto their bikes or walking. That's the the way we do things now in Toronto. After
he's a bike advocate. I was surprised because he's a bike advocate. I've been watching his career since he started. He's always promoted biking and bike lanes, and also like to go like complete opposite, like what you want to get done. It's like put all your bike lanes here. Let's put a highway over there now. It doesn't make any sense. kind of like an oxymoron, you might say. I use that word sometimes, you know. But
Well, what we certainly say is nobody should be afraid of facts, and that's what we call our group Gardner East Transparency. What we're simply saying, or get what we want to do is get the facts, and nobody should be afraid of facts, whether you're for the Gardner or against it. The facts should not be a question of debate. We've got opportunity. I mean,
oh, you froze there, Robert.
put in place in 2016. We updated it in 2019. I mean, that wasn't such a radical decision. I mean, that you know, they provided an update. Why not provide an update when there's $1 billion? There'd be no decision this council will make likely that a single project that's involved that kind of money.
I think we should do more culture change, like the blue box. Once we got the COVID, we had culture change. We got used to the distance, you know, protocol of safety. It's like anything, like biking. I was talking to Robert about this and some other people in the city. We got to educate people, just like the climate, the green economy. We got to push that on people, educate young people. You know that biking is the best, walking's the best. It's more healthy. You know, because right now, like when I would do my canvassing, like I talk to a lot of people from different countries. They go like, "What's green economy? What is that? What is even never even thought about biking?" Oh, then a lot of people like surprised they told me, "Oh, you got a bike lane? I didn't know we had bike lanes in Toronto." I said, "Yeah, we've got them." I had maps with I always carry maps with my canvas. I here, take a map, take a look and check it out yourself. There, I met a lady years later. I gave her a bike map too downtown Humber. I was drawing my pictures there, and she started as a senior citizen. 78, she wanted to go biking, and all her friends from the residents thought she was nuts. This is like, now I saw her 5 years later, and now she's part of a club, a seniors club, and they go biking during the spring and summer hour. And she started this. And back then, people that told her she was nuts are now part of the group. So you see, one person makes a change right there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to your point, in terms of elderly people, we often see that. Well, the elderly can't cycle. Well, I mean, that's a ridiculous thought. And for many elderly, they don't, you know, not having the responsibility and the danger of a car is really a great way to get around. And you know, I've spoken to some people. They say, well, the bicycle is my wheelchair. It's easier than walking, right? And it's so easy to get around. And in terms of your point of culture change, well, you know, the pandemic was really pushed us to rethink how we allocate public space. And it was really, it gave us a real push in the right direction. Unfortunately, I think now that the pandemic is almost, well, waning or has changed, we're not as worried about it, that we're going back to building bike lanes at a slower pace again. And that push that we had from the pandemic in terms of reallocating space and changing how we think about public space, we're now reverting to some of the old ways, not all the way back, but seem to be slowly going back. And so that's why we've got to keep pushing for that reallocation of public space to more efficient ways of getting around. So we don't, you know, often you'll hear politicians say, well, I gave this to the cyclists. You know, it's sort of the idea be, well, they'll be happy now. Hopefully they'll go away for a while. But
like
what we need to think of,
it's like you bring the pigeons, you know?
Exactly. I mean, the bicycle is simply an element of a good transportation system. So that's how we need to think of it. So when we do install bike lanes, we say, well, that's a victory for the community. It's not a victory for, like, you know, cyclists. Yeah. It's a victory for all of us because it makes our community healthier, safer, makes it easier to get around, all of these advantages. And that's the way we're trying to get people to think. It's not bike lanes for, you know, cycling enthusiasts. It's bike lanes for a good transportation system. Period.
I have friends, like two of my friends are best friends are doctors, and some nurses I know. They've said, not officially on paper, but they said accidents have lessened since they put a bike, especially down Danforth. They say have so many. They actually had a statistic which actually occurs in what area, but since on Danforth the bike lanes put there the last so many years, less accidents, and also on Young as well. So that says right there, you know, people think slowing down with traffic is aggressive. Get that aggressive out of your nature, but still, bike lanes. Not a case of bike lanes, also just safety, and even like wheelchairs. I have talked to people with security dogs for walking. They feel free now. They're not afraid of getting hit by cars or whatever. Like it helps opens with a whole avenue of things. Biking, pedaling. You talk about seniors on the wheelchairs. I talk to seniors. I have one senior. She goes to my library. She's got like a lying bed. She got like a wheelchair scooter, and she's been like that for years. She goes to the library. Now she's discovered the bike lanes down on by Eglinton there, because they put the bike lanes for the LRT. It hasn't opened yet, but she uses that. She actually takes the bike lane on her. You see her on this. It's funny. You see her on a like a bed, which is a scooter. It's electric, and she goes to her library. She goes to her grocery shop. She's great. She never had that. She didn't have that opportunity before, but because it's there, she uses it. So it's just all
Yeah,
kinds of things.
and that's yeah, and that's precisely what if you look back, every bike lane that we install virtually, and it's like as soon as the bike lane's installed, lots of people cycle on it. I mean, except if it's in a way out of the way place that no one needs it, and it's always like sort of a eureka moment. Wow, people when there's a bike lane, people cycle. But that eureka moment is repeated every time, and
Yeah.
it's like at this point we should say, of course, if we install bike lanes, people will use them. That's because it's such an enjoyable way to get around. It's easy, it's healthy, it's affordable. But we seem to, every time we put them in, not only do we go through the same arguments each time about, well, how will it affect business? How will it affect the motor traffic? This and that. We do that same thing, and we have to dispel all of those myths. And then we say, wow, look at all those people cycling. And it's like, why don't we get through all of those steps a bit more quickly and
Because
just
you already
install it.
you already struggled before, and now you got to do it again, right? The same struggle, the same fight. Like just take the example. It's already improved already on Danforth. It's already been done. Why do you keep kind of like I said, keep having a fight to extend the Danforth line down to the end, way down to the airport line, right? It shouldn't have to be a
Well,
fight.
we do the same thing every time. There's a debate. People say, "I really love cycling, but not here." And so then we search for these mythical.
Sorry, I want to cut you off. You want to go for another round, or you got time limit?
Yeah. Let's go for another.
Okay, I'm going to cut off here. I'll just sign on the next one right away.
Oh, I'll do that.
Okay, so I'm just going to cut off here. I'll be back in 2 seconds. We'll be there, and I'll just.